like somebody in your 30s. You would not believe. You keep yourself trim. That's nice.
Thank you very much. So I want to hear that again. Not a compliment to me, but what's it like to turn 75, and what's to think about turning 75?
75. I always thought people were old when they were 75. Probably, people were, when I was a teenager, somebody 40 was old. So it's all perspective, and it depends on how old you are. But, you go through your life and you think, oh, I feel good. And then one day you're 75 and you think, 75, that's ancient. That is so old. But, I feel great. I feel great. Walked at Lake Scranton this morning. Walk at Lake Scranton every day. And then I do other exercise classes and yoga and things. But, of course, they're shut down now with COVID. So, but it's wonderful to keep going and to keep doing the things that you always have been able to do. I hope that never ends. I realistically know that maybe someday, but maybe I can hold that off if I keep doing them.
Right. Good. All right. So we're going to start with tell me your name and today's date.
Sure. My name is Mary Lou Seeley, and the date today is the 18th of July, 2020. The COVID year. Who will ever forget the COVID year? Unbelievable.
Terrific. All right, so I'm going to start with my questions.
Okay.
So tell me the community that you grew up in, and describe what that was like living in it.
Sure. I grew up I'd say it's about 6 blocks from here, over back in Southside a little farther. We're here on Crown Avenue. I think this is still considered the Nativity section, but I grew up farther back. We would always tell people, oh, it's right by Southside Pool, because we knew everybody knew where Southside Pool was, so, and it was wonderful growing up near Southside Pool, because it just, we were on the street. It was 823 East Elm Street, but it was the log road. They always called it the old log road. And I think at one time there were logs put under there to stabilize the road, because it's kind of narrow, and that's where it was. But there were blueberries. We could just go a few, maybe a mile back into the woods. My mother would walk us past St. Mary's Cemetery, where 81 is now, and up the hill. And there was a little spring there called Pete's Springs. You could get a drink of water. You never touch water coming out of a pipe now, but you could get a drink of clear spring water, and then pick some berries, and then go home, and my mother would make a pie. It was just very simple, easy living. My father worked for the city on the Department of Public Works, and the truck would pick him up every day. A good thing, because we didn't have a car. But, we never, I guess they never felt as though they needed one, or just didn't get one. But it was just very simple living. I remember growing up and listening to radio programs, The Lone Ranger and Amos and Andy, and just, the hit parade and music. There was music all the time in the house. My mother always had the radio on, or I think it was the early 50s, one of my sisters brought home a record player. And one of the little records she had was Shaboom, Shaboom. So I always know when that came out. And that was like 52, 53. And then the other side of that, or another record, was Three Coins in a Fountain. And later on, when, Jerry and I were in Italy, we saw the Trevi Fountain, and that was Three Coins in a Fountain. We threw the coins in, and I just remember particularly sitting around that record player, listening to that wonderful music, That was one of my older sisters. I was number 8 of 10. And so we had the benefit, the younger ones had the benefit of the older ones. And it was always so interesting, because they would be bringing home records and a record player, or a new radio, or a doll for you, or something, a bathing suit in the summer. The older ones seemed to take care of the younger ones. It was, I miss them. There's only half of us now are still alive, but I miss them terribly, because they were like extended parents, brothers. And I remember when my brother went into the service in the early 50s, when it was the Korean War, luckily he didn't go. It was ending, I think, by the time he went.
Mhm.
But I remember him coming home with his duffel bag, and that was interesting, and just easy living. We went to the pool in the summer. We walked to Mountain Lake to ice skate in the winter.
Okay,
Mountain
where's
Lake
that?
is a lake. It's still there and it's still beautiful.
Uh-huh.
It's to the right. If you're going up East Mountain Road, it's to the right of East Mountain Road. It's to the
Okay.
right of Lake Scranton. So you keep
Uh,
going, and if you can't go any farther, you turn right and then go around by Robinson Park. There's a little
okay.
park there,
Right.
and we used to pick berries up there too. That was a
Okay.
beautiful,
Hmm.
wonderful place to pick berries.
Oh,
And even when our kids, when Mary Lynn and Geraldine and Pam were young, we would take them up there to pick berries. Now there's
okay.
houses there, so berries are
Right.
gone.
Right.
But Mountain Lake was a great place to ice skate
Okay.
in the winter. There was a little
Oh,
shack there that a man had a fire going, and you could go in there. Yeah, just a
oh.
neighbor, and he put a fire going in his little potbelly stove, and
Uh-huh.
you could go in there and put your ice skates on, and then go
Oh,
and ice. And again, when our kids were small, we took them up there to ice skate,
wow. Okay.
and so it just very simple. We tried to do with our kids the simple things
Right.
that we had when we were kids, just a picnic, picnic at Naog, or swimming lessons at Naog. I remember our kids taking swimming
Right.
lessons. You must have gone to Naog.
Hmm.
We
Yeah.
loved
Yeah.
Naog.
So I want to talk about those simple things in a
Mm-hmm.
moment, but sort of want to loop back to what you said about your father getting picked up by the
Yeah,
city.
yeah.
So it was possible to live a good life in Scranton
No
without the
car,
use of a car.
no car,
Could you
no
say a little bit more
TV.
about that? Yeah.
Sure, sure. No TV, no car. He was the foreman for the Department of Public Works, and in the South Side section. I guess each
Uh,
section had its own. Maybe that's the way it is today. I don't know. I don't follow it, but he was the foreman. We would get these calls from Mrs. Smith on Stafford Avenue, said that there's a pothole in front of her house or something, and they
mhm.
would take a crew up there. He also put roads in. He was not an engineer, but he would tell me how they would say, like, back, I think it's Fig Street, a couple of those streets
Mhm.
back there in Southside, where there really wasn't a smooth way to just make the street. They had to finagle, and they had to do a lot of engineering stuff.
Mm.
And he wasn't an engineer, and I'm sure they had a city engineer who did it too. But he would say, "Oh, they said that a road couldn't be put there, and we
Mhm.
put that road there." So he was
Uh-huh.
very proud of that.
Uh,
But
uh-huh.
yeah, those people would pick him up. The driver would pick him up, and he we went to there were stores, so we went to the corner.
Mhm.
There were no malls. I
Uh-huh.
think the first mall was built here in around the time Pam was born, so maybe the year we got married, 1966.
Okay.
67, I think, is when Viewmont opened, Viewmont Mall. But there were no malls. You would go to. There was a great store on South Webster Avenue. In fact, LaSalle is
Uh-huh.
there now, but it used
Okay.
to be Hertz's.
Okay.
And he still, because he collects all kinds of antiques and things, and he has a sign for Hertz's. But you could go in there and buy an iron. You could go
Uh-huh.
and buy a T-shirt. You could buy a whole bunch of things. It was a great little store that you
Uh-huh.
would maybe need a department store now. And there he was on the
Uh,
corner of, I think it's Birch and South Webster.
okay.
So that was a great place.
So you could do all your shopping within walking
Yeah,
distance?
yeah, and a few Willow and South Webster was an AMP, and AMP
Okay.
stores were big around here. I think we saw one a few years ago in New Jersey. We were going somewhere in New Jersey,
Uh-huh.
and I said, "Oh my God, there's an AMP store." I thought they were all gone.
Uh-huh.
AMP had wonderful coffee, and they had wonderful glazed donuts. But
Uh-huh.
it was like the first bigger grocery store I ever
Right.
saw. Otherwise, there was Kelly's store on the corner of Maple Street and Crown Avenue. That was just a few blocks from
Okay.
here. I think it's an apartment building now, but that was a great little store. And so yeah, or there was a place on South Webster and Maple that was also a grocery store. It was called Shakurki's. I don't know how they spelled it,
Okay. Mhm.
but that was a great little store too. And that was open later at night. If my father got home later and we needed something from the store, I would go with my brother down there, you know.
Right.
But
So
it's
the streets at night, weren't any cars or many
no,
cars
not
along.
many cars at all. In fact, in the winter, in the 900 block of Maple, no, 800 block of Maple Street,
Mhm.
we used to just, you know, go sleigh ride. Right,
Uh-huh.
there were so few cars on that street.
Mhm.
Now the city opened up Alder Street to sleigh ride, you
Oh,
know, and they opened that up and they put barricades. But there were no barricades here, but nobody was afraid. You went
Mhm.
down that hill down to South Irving Avenue, and then you walked all the way back up. So
okay. It
that
was
was a
like 2 or 3 blocks?
yeah,
Or?
no, just one, but one
Right.
long block.
Yeah.
And kids would come from all over, and you'd be sleigh riding after dark. You could be out there, and I mean, we moved from there when I was 10, so I know that under 10, I would know you'd never let your child now a few blocks in the dark, you know.
Uh-huh.
But in those days, you know, things were safe, it seemed, and
Hmm.
just it was a different time.
Right. So that kind of freedom as a child, um, just talk about that. How do you think it helped develop the person that you are today?
Oh yeah, I think that was you didn't know any different really. You
Mhm.
could you walked to school, so we would walk from that 800 block of East Elm Street. The next street over this way was Maple. So then the school over here is on Beach and Crown, and
Mhm.
that was only so it was like 2.5 blocks. So
Uh-huh.
you would maybe walk through the alleys or walk through somebody's yard, you know, pick up
Right.
your friends along the way,
Mhm.
and then go home for lunch, and then go back. And it was a very, very simple, you know, and yeah, you did feel free. You did feel free.
Mhm.
After a while, you could go. My mother wouldn't let like me myself go to Mountain Lake, like say in the winter,
Uh-huh.
to ice skate unless I went with an older brother and older sister, so that was okay. But there was a sense of freedom. On Saturday, there was a movie down at the Globe Theater on the corner of I think it's Beach and Pittston Avenue.
Okay.
It's a moving place now. I forget the name of the moving place, but that was an old. You could almost see the
Garrity's?
marquee. Yes, I think it is
Okay.
Garrity's. You can almost see something that would indicate that it's a
Okay. Huh.
movie place. And that was a great place to see. You'd see a feature, you'd see a Lone Ranger serial, you'd see a cartoon, you know,
Uh-huh.
wonderful. And then on Thursday night, they had dishes. They gave away dishes, so my mother sometimes would go with you. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
and you know that's a collector's item now. I think they have green leaves on them or something. You know, you could get a dish
Uh-huh.
on a different kind of a dish. Yeah.
Huh.
Never mind if you wanted to see that movie, you wanted that dish.
Right. So you keep
So.
coming back to the simple life. Like,
Mhm.
why is that good for kids today?
Because I think all of this electronic stuff, which is so wonderful, the strides that have been made in all of this, but it can be overwhelming. I myself am not on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
It's too much. When I was doing the job, the editing of depositions, I have a computer and I would work on that, and then I have email, of course, on that, and that's all I want. I don't want to have it would be too. I would have to be doing that all the time. Then I
Right.
can't stand that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I like to pick up a book. I don't even know. My neighbor tells me she just read Mary Trump's book on her Kindle. You know, and so then I think, oh, I should have it. But you know, I tried. I looked at Kindles and I thought, I like to pick up a book.
Right.
You know, I like to read the book. I'm simple, I guess. I just as soon have the simpler life. It's overwhelming to have and to be dragged from place to place. You know, we didn't do that. We didn't go shopping. If we needed something, we went. I'm the same way now. If I need something, I'll go shopping. But I mean, say all the stores were open and all that. I don't go shopping to shop just to, and you know, not to say anything against anybody who does.
Right.
They might need that. You know, I think when you grow up without a lot, you know, when you have a big family and you grow up without a lot of stuff, you don't need a lot of stuff because you know you were happy without a lot. I think of my mother who had practically nothing. And honestly, she'd say, "Oh, feel that rain on your face. nice. Doesn't that feel, she would love to plant tulips in the fall and watch them come up in the spring, and just just a wonderful way about her that was not rushed. She'd bake bread and bake pies and, like to pick berries, and she died too young. But, I just think it's a good way to live, and we try to do that with the girls. We try to live those kind of values that would be meaningful to them and help them as they grew older with maybe anxiety or things that would confront them, as because you would not always be there. You wouldn't always be with them. But you would want to have them to remember things you said, or the way you did things, or the way you are. And the other thing I always like to try to tell them is that you are enough. To try to be somebody who you're not. How many people do you know like that? And they must be chasing whatever their whole lives. You can't find happiness if you don't have that understanding that you are enough.
Right. Yeah, I think that's important, and it sort of combines like a couple of different thoughts. When you're constantly surrounded by news and information, there's all these things and people to compare yourself with, and so keeping things simple and appreciating the simple lives, and then also sort of appreciating that you are enough. I think that those go well together.
Yeah. Oh, I think so. I think so. And you'd like kids to think that. You would want you would want kids to think that. You would hope that they would, because they are enough. You are enough. I'm enough. You would want them to have that good feeling about themselves, because there are a lot of things, that.
Especially that girl's face.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. I'll say, but boys too. That just. It's important to have that confidence. And how do you instill that confidence? Just,
So you mentioned that your mother really experienced life through these important and simple ways, like just feeling the rain on your face. I just haven't heard anybody say that. So what kind of experiences do you think that she had when she was young that sort of helped her really appreciate that?
Oh, I think that 1918 flu epidemic probably threw her for a loop. She was almost 9. So you're almost becoming aware of yourself and your because you're such a child before then. But as you start into that, and she had to immediately grow up, I'm sure, and help with her younger brothers, which she never bothered her. In fact, they remained close for their whole lives. They remained close. But I think that gave her an appreciation.
What happened during that epidemic?
That her mother died. Her mother died so suddenly. One day she was a little girl almost 9 years old, and then the next she was trying to help be a mother to these other little boys who were probably walking around wondering, like she was, what happened to our mother. She told my brother that one thing she remembered was the hearse driving down Maple Street, having picked up her mother. The hearse with the horses pulling it, and they had picked up her mother, and down Maple Street it went. There goes your mother, you never see again. So I think that had a lasting effect on her, and she never talked about it. That was it. She never, I think in those days, like the silent generation, like World War II heroes, and didn't talk about it much. So, but I would think it must have had quite an effect on her. But that and getting married young and having 10 children. I mean, she appreciated everything. Appreciated everything. Yeah. I think, what could you be thinking? Are you crazy? There was not even any help anywhere. But luckily she had an extended family too.
Oh,
I
okay.
think they probably helped her, and
Right, right. So is there any particular family member in this large extended family that you admired, and why? What was the,
absolutely, I had a sister who was 15 years older than I, and she just kind of always took me under her wing.
mm,
She went to Millersville State Teachers College, I think they called it at the
mhm,
time, which, to go away to college at that time, and there was no money, and I think she lasted there maybe 2 years, maybe three, and then she came home, and she then went to the University of Scranton at night.
mm,
But she played bridge, and she was an early skier
mm.
in the early 50s at Elk Mountain. In
Oh,
fact, she didn't like skiing back here. She said
mm.
it's really too tame. She skied in Vermont,
Oh,
Killington and
oh.
Stowe. She skied in Europe with another sister, but played bridge, worked at the International Salt Company for 20
Mm,
some years,
mhm.
and then they were taken over by a company, and so then she was the editor of the salt maker, their company
Oh,
publication,
huh.
and worked in public relations, and so then they were taken over, but then her job was eliminated but
Um,
she became a paralegal then, and she
huh.
represented Social Security clients who were turned down for disability,
Mhm.
and when she had an aneurysm at the age of 60.
Oh,
It was awful. She never was right again. She was
mhm,
brain damaged. She probably should have died then. In fact,
mhm,
knowing her, she would have said, but they operated on her, and she lived in a nursing home for another 10, 11 years.
mm, mm.
But the judge in Wilkes-Barre, that's where the Social Security hearings are. He told there was a woman I knew. In fact, the kids had her at school at St. Mary's, Candy Catalano, and she then was got Madeline's job
Mm,
anyway. And the judge said, "You have big shoes to fill."
mm,
So wasn't that a
mhm.
nice compliment?
Yeah,
She would have liked that.
yeah.
But
So
she
she
was
was sort
very
of a
good.
groundbreaker. Is that how would you describe her?
Yeah,
Like,
I would say, because I can't imagine that there were a lot of women skiing,
right,
in
right.
the early 50s, late 40s, early 50s.
Hmm,
She graduated from Central in 48, I believe.
hmm,
And she was the president of the German club over there.
hmm,
So,
hmm.
but she would always, look out for me anyway. And the older ones would do that. That I had other
Right.
wonderful older sisters too, but
So Madeline, what was her last name?
Nape, she never got married. She was the only one of us who did
Right.
not get married.
What's your last name?
Nape, it was
P.
Nape, like the nape of
Oh,
the
Nate.
neck.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
Hmm,
she was the only one who didn't get married, and I
okay.
think part of it was, she took the responsibility.
Hmm.
She helped everybody else, and so,
Seems
but
like every
just
family had a
yeah,
sister, an older
yeah,
sister that did
yeah,
that, right?
and all the nieces, our girls loved her, and all the nieces and nephews just loved her. She
Hmm,
went out of her way, you know, uh, to
hmm.
to do things with them, and like she did, for me. So
Right.
I would say if there's a family member that I would be eternally grateful
Hmm,
to, it would be her. And
hmm.
let me show you what I keep that
Sure.
reminds me of her. Oh, I get
All right.
stiff when I sit.